Last night, 6 Democratic candidates for president met on the debate stage in Iowa, the last debate before the Iowa caucuses. It was the smallest and it was the whitest group of candidates so far. Our Amna Nawaz brings us this report.
The debate ended on an awkward note, with Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren seemingly rejecting a handshake from Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders. That was after moderators brought up a disagreement between the two over a private conversation in December of 2018, in which Sanders reportedly told Warren he didn't believe a woman could win the election.
Why did you say that?
Well, as a matter of fact, I didn't say it. In 2015, I deferred, in fact, to Senator Warren. There was a movement to draft Senator Warren to run for president. And you know what? I stayed back. Senator Warren decided not to run, and I did run afterwards. Hillary Clinton won the popular vote by 3 million votes. How could anybody in a million years not believe that a woman could become president of the United States?
You're saying that you never told Senator Warren that a woman could not win the election.
That is correct.
Senator Warren, what did you think when Senator Sanders told you a woman could not win the election?
I disagreed. Bernie is my friend, and I am not here to try to fight with Bernie. But look, this question about whether or not a woman can be president has been raised, and it's time for us to attack it head on. And I think the best way to talk about who can win is by looking at people's winning record. So, can a woman beat Donald Trump? Look at the men on this stage. Collectively, they have lost 10 elections. The only people on this stage who have won every single election that they've been in are the women, Amy and me.
The issue of electability, who can actually beat President Trump in November, came up throughout the night. At one point, each candidate was asked to address a vulnerability. For former South Bend, Indiana Mayor Pete Buttigieg, it was his lack of support from black voters.
The black voters who know me best are supporting me. It's why I have the most support in South Bend. It's why among elected black officials in my community who have gotten into this race, by far most of them are supporting me.
Businessman Tom Steyer pushed back on the perception that he's buying his way into the election.
I started a business by myself in one room. I didn't inherit a penny from my parents. But whoever is going to beat Mr. Trump is going to have to beat him on the economy, and I have the experience and the expertise to show that he's a fake there and a fraud.
And Minnesota Senator Amy Klobuchar reiterated that her regional roots make her the best match for President Trump in November.
I am going to be able to stand across from him on that debate stage and say to my friends in Iowa, the Midwest is not flyover country for me. I live here. I'm going to be able to look at him and say, you've treated these workers and farmers like poker chips. For me, these are my friends and these are my neighbors.
The debate focused heavily on foreign policy, with candidates saying they would take a much different approach on Iran from Mr. Trump. Former Vice President Joe Biden.
We have lost our standing in the region. We have lost the support of our allies. The next president has to be able to pull those folks back together, reestablish our alliances, and insist that Iran go back into the agreement, which I believe with the pressure applied as we put on before, we can get done.
The candidates also touched on childcare, higher education, and impeachment, with polls showing a four-way split between Biden, Sanders, Warren, and Buttigieg. It still remains to be seen who will come out on top when Iowans caucus on February 3rd. For the PBS NewsHour, I'm Amna Nawaz.
And here to analyze last night's debate and tell us how Iowans are reacting, I'm joined by O.K. Henderson. She is the news director at Radio Iowa, and she joins us from Des Moines. Kay Henderson, welcome back to the NewsHour. So what kinds of reactions are you picking up from people?
One of the striking things about the conversation between Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders that I'm hearing from Iowans is it's not necessarily about the two of them. It's more about reaching out to former Clinton voters. As you recall, half of the people who went to the caucuses in 2016 voted for Hillary Clinton. As I go out and cover many of these candidates, namely Elizabeth Warren, Amy Klobuchar, and the former candidate, Kamala Harris, I heard from many in the crowd this phrase, "It's time for a woman in the White House." And that conversation really reminded people of that. The other interesting thing about that conversation was that Elizabeth Warren drew Amy Klobuchar into it. And so I think that was a signal to people, if voting for a woman candidate is important to you and I am not your woman, Elizabeth Warren may have been telegraphing, consider the woman at the other end of this stage if you're a moderate.
So maybe this was a good night for Elizabeth Warren?
In visiting with people who are her supporters, they were thrilled with her. In visiting with people who sort of are uncommitted, albeit most of the electorate, the majority of the electorate, if you look at that Iowa poll, 58% of people either haven't made up their mind or they could change and support a different candidate. She was making her points cogently. The Buttigieg people are thrilled with his performance. He was able to compare and contrast during the conversation that Vice President Biden and Senator Sanders had about the Iraq War. That vote was a long time ago. It was in 2002. So that is the core of his message, that he's a forward-looking candidate, and he made that point during the debate.
So any of the campaigns concerned as a result of last night?
Well, obviously, there's always 20/20 vision, and they might have wished that they had made a point, but now it's, the rush to February 3rd. And if you're one of these three senators, you are now stuck in Washington, perhaps for days on end at an impeachment trial. And so the Sanders and Warren's camps are going to have to rely on the people that have been on the ground for them for a year, and in the case of Sanders, for several years.
So at this point, Kay Henderson, you've been covering politics in the state of Iowa for a long time. What is uppermost in the minds of voters? And I'm not asking, you can't speak for everybody, but what are you
Right,
hearing?
Exactly. Well, what has struck me is that many people who tell me they're undecided, they're either comfortable with their choices in that they tell me I could pick any of these people, namely the front runners, and be comfortable that they would be a good standard bearer for the party. And then you have these other folks that you visit with, and they are almost petrified of making this choice and making the wrong choice because, as you well know, Judy, every nominee that the Democratic Party has picked in this century has won the Iowa caucuses.
That's right. So they feel the weight of history on their shoulders. And just quickly, Kay Henderson, some comment about the fact that at this point on the debate stage, and we know there are other candidates running who didn't qualify for the debate, but at this point we're looking at a pretty non-diverse group, no person of color. Is that coming up in conversation?
It is, especially among the folks who supported Kamala Harris. And then most recently, we had Cory Booker drop out of the race. And you have that Booker camp, which was really allied behind their candidate. And other candidates are looking at those folks and wondering where they're going to go in this race. And so part of the calculation here in the closing days is, how do you convince people who had been supporting and really fervently supporting those two candidates to come into another fold?
Well, the days are growing shorter. We're getting ever closer. Kay Henderson, thank you very much.
And thank you.